on the podcast with Adam Gropper. He's the best-selling author of What They Don't Teach You in Law School, How to Get a Job, the 6-step process for landing a great legal job, even if you don't know where to start. Adam's website is LegalJob.com. And if you're a law student, you want to identify your dream job, create a clear plan for securing it, and then quickly and competently execute the plan, then Adam is the person you need to sit up and pay close attention to. We're going to have a phone conversation, hear some amazing stories, get some insights, some breakthroughs. So Adam, glad to be speaking with you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Robert. This is fun. And I will say up front, I appreciate you doing my audiobook, which is really going to help a lot of law students. Law students have told me, your book is great, and I've skimmed through it, and I'd really like to spend some time digesting it, but can you please do an audiobook? And then you came along and offered the audiobook, so I appreciate that, and I think a lot of law students, if they're listening, are probably very thankful as well.
And I'm happy to do that for you, and even me, myself, as not a lawyer of any kind, it still is insightful as far as hearing about the work ethic and the networking. And it seems like a recurring theme in your book is this idea of, well, what does the law firm need, right? A lot of people, they say, well, it's all about me. I need to have secure a job. I need to brag about my skills. But you tell all these cool stories about how someone like successfully networked and landed a job, or even if they didn't, they got some helpful feedback. And it seems like the mindset we need to be in is, how can I help the law firm? Where are they stuck? Or maybe what kind of area of the law could they use some young, fresh insight? And how can I then present myself as a solution to their problem? Is that kind of on the right track?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Robert. And that's what's kind of motivated me to write the book. A lot of law students that I work with, first of all, they're very smart, capable people. And in law school, you learn how to think analytically, right? They call it think like a lawyer. And it's very cool. And you think about cases, and you think about the law, and you think about a lot of, things that could happen, bad things that could happen, and a lot of contingencies and alternatives. And all of that thinking is very, very helpful when thinking about the law. But Robert, unfortunately, it's not very helpful when thinking about a career. That's why a lot of law students refer to me as a career therapist. When thinking about a career, if you get hung up on being too analytical, almost like, okay, what if I pick this particular job? One of the steps, Robert, you mentioned 6 steps. One of the steps is pick a major. And a lot of students come to me and they say, I want to pick a major, but what if I go down this path and I don't like it? And then I foreclose all these other opportunities over here. Well, Robert, the problem with that thinking, that's thinking like a lawyer, right? What if this happens? What if this happens? What about this contingency? And that's, again, all very good when you're practicing law or you're thinking about law in law school. It's not very helpful in, when doing career planning. A lot of law students get stuck. They're stagnant because they can't even move forward. Because first of all, they don't have the steps, right? So my book is 6 steps. It doesn't have to be my steps, although those steps have helped a lot of people. But you need a plan, right? That's one of the steps, come up with a plan. But a lot of law students, even if you give them steps, they say, oh, this is great. Now I have the steps, but I can't do it. I can't move forward because I'm stuck thinking analytically. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's a great insight, that we need to not think analytically all the time, because there's definitely those situations where it serves us. But as far as the career planning, it does not serve us. And it makes me flash back to maybe like 15 years ago when I would teach people like how to set up a business, how to make a website. And I would say, well, where are you stuck? What step in the process are you on? And an overwhelming majority would say, I'm just trying to pick a niche, as you would say, a major. They're still at the starting line, perhaps because of this fear of saying, once I get down a path, now all these other options are closed to me. And I think of that like, well, you need to take a risk, right? You need to do this, and having less options can be advantageous, because like it kind of just like you burn the boats, right? You have this path forward. And so how do you get people unstuck, or how do we get people unstuck in this conversation if someone says, I'm so afraid of limiting my alternatives?
Right. And even when you said the word risk, I'm sure there are law students listening to this that are kind of cringing at the word risk, because that's not a word that is comfortable, for law students and lawyers in terms of, taking big risks. Maybe it's one of the reasons why law students go to law school. The way we do it, Robert, one thing is to kind of think about like a pie, right? Like 10 slices of a pie. And you think about, like, when you're in law school, a lot of people that are attracted to law school spend probably 8 of those pieces of pies, or maybe 9 pieces, thinking, right? And maybe 1 or 2 pieces acting, right? So it's sort of thinking, acting. And when you're thinking about acting, that doesn't count as acting. That still counts as thinking. So what we try to do is say, listen, we're not trying to get you to be a Robert or an Adam, right? We're not trying to get you to be a business person. We're not trying to get you to be a salesperson or a marketer, right? Again, all sort of words that make law students have some uncomfortable association with those words. But what we are trying to do is move the dial just a little bit, right? If you can spend just a little less time thinking, right? A little more time acting upon something, right? And that's the key here. We're not saying, you know what, just pick something and let's go. I liked your thought about risk. It's a risk, but it's a calculated risk. One of the steps is network effectively, right? And what I mean by that is, okay, you want to meet people who have, quote, been there, done that, right? And you want to ask them, what kinds of, tell me about kind of your practice. Tell me about the kinds of people that are successful in your practice, right? And maybe even at your employer. You mentioned law firms at the beginning. Note that it's not just for law firms, although a lot of my stories are people getting into law firms, but it's also for government or for in-house or for nonprofits. There are a lot of different places where you can work. But yeah. So the question is, okay, let's take some action, and one of those action steps is networking with people, but effectively, right? Like, have a plan about sort of who you network with, what your agenda is, because the same person, Robert, that you network with about learning about the practice area or learning about the employer is not the same person you're going to ultimately interview with. I mean, it might be, but they're usually different types of people. So what I say is, okay, your first step is to kind of be comfortable with, we're going to do a little more acting and spend a little more time acting. So even if we can get you from, 8 or 7, 7, 8, or 9 to maybe 5, maybe 50%, or even just, 60%, something where you're just a little bit, you're making yourself uncomfortable, but again, in a calculated way. So
I love it.
yeah, the risk is calculated. So you develop a plan. That's the first step. Step 1. You develop a plan and you commit to that plan. And you develop the plan with help from outsiders, right? But you develop a plan. You say, I'm going to do this, because another problem, Robert, is at a lot of law schools, including my alma mater, they say, go network, number 1, or go to this panel, do meet as many people as you can, take as many classes as you can. Well, you can't. There's just limited time, right? And so you can't follow everybody's advice, right? And you can't do everything. But what you can do is you can read, you can get the book, or you can get other books that sort of lay out a process, lay out a plan. You commit to that plan and you take the steps, even if they're uncomfortable, that will put you on a path to, landing your dream job. Does that make sense?
It does. And you mentioned a few times this idea of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's huge. And I think that, especially growing up in the teenage years, the young adult years, a lot of people are even afraid of this concept of just embracing the cringe, right? And like in your book, you mentioned some of these ideas, like say you're looking into like this specific type of law or this specific law firm. You invite such and such at the law firm to lunch. You say, hey, can I buy you lunch? Can I just have a quick chat with you? And so many people, I'm sure, are just like afraid of even the thought of that, right? Afraid of even imagining it. But if you go out and do it and say, it doesn't make logical or emotional sense for me to do this, but I'm just going ahead and I'm going to do it anyway, because the people that have succeeded have taken these steps. They've embraced the cringe. They've embraced the uncomfortable. They've had these conversations. And then you also think, in all these stories that you tell, that if someone is successful, they're looking to pay it forward, right? They're looking to help the next generation. And I don't know if you've heard of this, Adam, this idea of the Ben Franklin syndrome. When I heard of this, it blew my mind. Like, if you ask someone for $1 and they hand it to you, it will psychologically get them to like you more. And you think it would be the opposite, right? But it's like, if someone is kind of, they're established in their law career and they're giving you advice, then they, for some brain reason, they like you more because they've helped you out and they've told you these things and given you advice. And so you lay out these steps, and we're here like kind of talking about ways people might not follow through, or they might talk themselves out of it. So what have you kind of seen as far as maybe the objections of someone networking or going and pursuing the career path? Like, why don't people do this more?
Right. It's a good question. That's an interesting story too. I haven't heard of that effect, but that's interesting. I guess it's this is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I think it's fear, like you said, it's fear of being uncomfortable. They were never taught this. I mean, a lot of people that go to law school, again, they're oriented towards being thoughtful, thinking, being reading, thinking, writing. They're not sort of thinking about quote selling themselves, and I don't even like that expression, selling themselves, because the way I think of it is it's about you in this process, and that you have to learn what you like, you have to learn what you're good at, you have to think about your experience and how that applies to employers. But a lot of people, they're just uncomfortable, again, like putting themselves out there. And I guess the how they overcome that, Robert, is when we explain to them, really this is going to be counterintuitive, but the focus really should be on the employer, or the focus when you're networking with somebody should be on them. It should be, as you say, on the successful person, right? The successful person does really want to help you, but they need help helping you. And when you introduce yourself as a successful person and you're not clear, for example, Robert, about what your ask is, and a lot of law students think, well, my ask is, can I have a job? And the answer, and my response to that is, no, that's not your ask. I mean, eventually you like a job, but you don't want a job from every person you meet. For most of the people you meet, your ask really is to try to understand about their career, learn about their career, learn about it. Like I said, what kinds of what kinds of people are good in the practice area that they're practicing, what kind of experience they have, what makes someone good at that job. Alternatively, what makes someone not so good at that particular area of law, or what makes someone not so suited for the big firm, or for a nonprofit, or for a small firm, wherever they're working. So if the answer, right, the answer to someone who's uncomfortable kind of putting themselves out there, is to remind that person to think about orienting towards the other person, right? It's I like to say it's all about them, or it's not about you. And so if you have a mindset, like, for example, Robert, I tell people, pretend you're a journalist, right? And your goal is to write an article about this person. Well, what would you like to know about this person, right? And really, you don't need to tell your story. You know your story. What would be most helpful for that other person who would like to be your mentor and would like to help you is for you to ask pointed questions to the other person. Even a question like, if you were me, networking and meeting, and you were a second-year law student and you weren't sure how to proceed, what kinds of questions would you ask, right? Give the authority to the other person to help them help you. But I think once you get out of your own mindset, right, that this is about me and I'm the law student, I'm looking for a job, and make it more about I'm learning about other people, and that's the exercise, and ultimately it's to help you, but it's really take it slow, learn about other people, learn how they got to where they are, and then take any advice you can from them, but in a way where you're focused on them and not focused on you. Does that make sense? Talked a little bit in circles there.
It does, but circular talking is good because it revisits and reemphasizes the points and really makes it land. And so what this tells me is that if say someone watching or listening to this is nervous about doing some of these activities, right? Nervous about asking the questions, going to lunch, interviewing the would-be mentor, then by focusing on the other person, it takes the pressure off you, right? Because
Right.
you're in this kind of journalist mindset and you're just kind of asking someone else about them. And for all we know, this person doesn't get to talk about themselves on a regular basis, or to like a up and comer young person. So they like that you're doing this, that you're giving them the opportunity to talk about themselves. And then there's the repetition kind of aspect of it, of it might be awkward the first few times, but it's kind of like going on a date, right? Very first or very second or third date that you went on as a youngster is probably kind of awkward, but you got better at knowing what to do and what not to do. And it seems like as part of this, you mentioned about these things, like ask them about like career advice, ask them what they would do in your situation. And then it seems like then there's these opportunities there to jump in and maybe not one up the person or make it or turn it around and make it about you, but like relate to specific things. Or if they say, hey, well, I wish if I could start over, I do this, or my law firm needs that. Then that's kind of the door has opened a little bit for you to then jump in. And so, like, do you see when, say, like a law student is doing this kind of networking. And you mentioned in the book about like you talk to like a panelist and then like email them afterwards or meet with someone for lunch. Like, is there an ideal situation, or if someone says, okay, I haven't done this, I'm not experienced with this networking thing, what is the ideal setup? What's a good just initial plan for talking to some people?
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me the answer, because that's exactly right. The panelist, I love that one, right? Is the panelist, you're in the audience and you go to the panel because you want to hear the person talk about whatever it is they're talking about. Maybe they're talking about career. Maybe they're not even talking about career. Maybe they're talking about law, the law that they're doing, or client successes. And you're there, and then you stay after the panel, and if you have time, if they have time, maybe you try to meet the panelists, or even if you're scared to do that. A lot of law students say, I'm just too shy, I can't do that. You can email that. Usually if someone's on a panel, for example, at a law school or even wherever they're at a panel, they probably are open to the contact. But again, the contact has to be oriented to them. So what we've done, a lot of law students, is say, hey, I saw you in this panel and I liked when you said this, I really enjoyed the panel. Here's what I really enjoyed. But you have to be sincere, right? It can't be made up. Is you saw the panel, this is what you took away from the panel, and you're wondering if you could meet and hear more about their practice area. Again, you got to make it convenient for them. And I think I advise in the book maybe 20 minutes tops for coffee, somewhere at a location that's near their firm. Don't give them homework that they have to kind of search in a calendar and search dates. You give them a couple dates, couple times by their firm or by wherever they're working, so it's convenient for them. But yeah, see, the focus, just like you said, Robert, is on them, right? Because it's on the panel that they presented and what you liked about that panel. And here's another tip that I give for a lot of law students. If you can do this, I would lead up front with, I'm not looking for a job, and that's a little bit counterintuitive, but it really puts people's guard down, because the truth is, yes, while in the big picture you are going to look for a job, like I said, most of the people that you meet with, you're not looking for a job from them. So to say I'm not looking for a job, but instead I'm just interested in your career path, it really puts people's guard down. And then they think, okay, I can meet with this person. I don't owe them a job. I don't owe them an explanation about whether my company is hiring or whether my firm is hiring. And they really are sincere. They just want to meet with me to talk about my, the panel and my career path. So I guess to answer your question, for the really shy folks, or the folks that don't want to put themselves out there, going to a panel is a great idea to focus on them, and it's a nice launch point. And because, of course, that mentor, that future mentor has put themselves out there, right? They agreed to be a panelist, particularly if they're a panelist at a law school. That signals to me that's a person who's open to being reached out to. Does that make sense?
That does. That's a wonderful insight, and it's because it's very easy to be pessimistic about this whole networking thing and think like, oh, why would they talk to me? And you think, well, that's why you do this on a regular basis. You make it a habit, but then you think, well, if someone is on a panel, they're choosing to do that, and they want to get some results from it. And if the results are that people then follow up and reach out, like it's so rare for anyone to reach out for anything, right? And
Right.
so you do that, you'll be one of the few that say, hey, I appreciate it. But then you're also saying that you add this customization, right? Because if you just send the same form letter to anyone who's on a panel, that's spamming. That's
Right.
not very personal. But you actually pay attention and you say, well, hey, I learned these couple of things. I really like that you said these things. And what's also great about what you have set up in the book is you have these templates, which I find very valuable, where you say, oh, hey, can we meet for coffee? Just 20 minutes. And you even go to the point of saying like, hey, I know you work at this law firm. I know there's this coffee shop like right across the street. So can you do either of these times? And that's really great. As far as you saying, don't give them homework. Don't make them work to meet with you. You should be the one doing the work. Set it up very easily for them. And so we only have a few minutes left in our conversation, and I wanted to make sure that we got a personal story from you, because you tell all kinds of cool stories in there. But whenever I've been kind of upping my game the last few years as far as the personalness, the personal connection. And I'm just like, I love hearing the stories, especially those past stressful ones when you said, I don't even know how I'm going to continue. And you had to really like stretch yourself, push yourself. So does anything come to mind as far as like a personal transformation story from you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I just want one other point on the networking is to have specific asks, right? So no homework and specific asks. What exactly do you want from that person? What do you want to hear and learn about that person? Don't make it vague. I'm a law student. I just want to meet with you. You have to be very clear about what you want to talk about. And I think that'll encourage a response. Yeah, as far as a personal story, Robert, and what motivated me in part to write this book is my story, right? Is I didn't know how this whole thing worked, how the process worked. And I got rejected, Robert, from 150 law firms, including Baker and Husser, where I ultimately ended up working and making partner. I got rejected twice before I ultimately got in. And the reason why I got rejected, Robert, for a lot of reasons, but it was that I wasn't focused on the employer. I was focused on me, a law student. Here's my experience. Here's what I bring. Here's why I'm great. Here's why you need to hire me. And what it is, I self-taught basically, Robert, and I had some good mentors along the way. But what I learned is every piece of that puzzle, Robert, like the cover letter, right? The interview, the emails, just all the things we're talking about, that has to be oriented to who I'm reaching out to. And instead, I was writing my resume, Robert, for me. I wasn't writing it for the reader. I was writing it for me, the writer, and that makes no sense. So I didn't know which experiences to focus on and which jobs to focus on. But once I started pivoting and kind of learning more about the place I wanted to work and what experiences they would care about, then I became a much stronger candidate. And that's what I advise law students. It's as soon as and how do you do that? Well, that's why you have to do all the networking. And two of the steps. One is think like an employer, right? You want to think like an employer. What do they care about? What is their dream candidate? And a lot of law students say to me, well, I'll never be their dream candidate. Well, that might not be true. They might want 6 things and you might have 4 things, right? Now, if they want 6 things and you have 1 thing, maybe that's not for you. Maybe that's not a match. But I wouldn't say you have to have 6 out of 6. But if they want 6 things and you have 3.5, 4 things, I think that's a good match. And you can explain and you say, well, how do I learn? Well, you talk to people that work there, right? People who work there, or people that used to work there, or clients of the firm. People that can speak to what that firm culture is, how they help their clients, how they work with their clients, what kind of people they like to have work there, what kind of people succeed there. Once you learn that, Robert, then your cover letter can speak to that, right? Just what you say, you don't want to do form emails. You don't want to do form cover letters either. So my personal experience is, I got rejected twice, and finally did, break through because I was using this process. And then ultimately I kept the rejection letters. And so when I made partner, I showed that rejection letter to the committee that ultimately admitted me as partner and said, well, I just want you to know that you thought I shouldn't be even at this firm. And now just 7 short years later, Robert, they're making me partner. So that was, that's sort of what prompted the book. And that's how I know, that's how I know it works. Not because I know it worked for me, but now I know from now hundreds and hundreds, Robert, of law students that have different things, right? Some have certain, better grades than others. Some are at different law schools. Some are a little more comfortable taking risks than others. But in any of those circumstances, again, if you follow this formula, and it doesn't have to be my formula, this just happens to be a formula that works, of, focusing on other people and, making a plan, sticking to the plan, focusing on the long term. You got to focus on the long term. You can't focus on the day to day. Then you'll get that job you want.
Just like you did, just like you overcome it and you persevered and you adjusted the plan and the strategy a little bit. And
Yeah.
so what comes to mind is there's that cliche of, well, your thinking got you to this point. And if you want better than what you've been getting, then you need to embrace new kinds of thinking. And it just seems like a lot of the raw harness material just needs to be refocused in a different way, right? Like these law school students that you've helped, that you teach, that read your book, they're hard workers, right? And they're smart people, but then perhaps a lot of their talent has been applied in isolation and has not involved other people, other mentors,
Right.
and embracing the feedback. Because what's great about some of these scenarios to lay out, these plans, is that they tell you almost what to put in your cover letter, right? They tell you how to position your resume. They tell you, well, if this particular area of the law, if say tax law sounds good, then you should be looking to get this job, have this step in your career, and that way you have this experience. And then when you go on, step number 2 to the job you really want, you say, hey, I've got this other past experience with the IRS, for example, or I have interned at such and such law firm and I've worked on that. And then now you kind of built a story for yourself in your resume, and that way you stand out. And it seems like these are all things that maybe some people naturally have these personality skills, and maybe some people like luck out once or twice and wonder like, how can I repeat that? But this is great because it allows us to like apply our strategic thinking and our kind of, analytical and weighing the pros and cons and all that in kind of like a larger scope, right? And not just in doing the work or getting the grades, but in positioning ourselves and just involving other people, these mentors. And I love how you mentioned there about how you meet with someone, you should have a goal, but the goal is not to have a job. It's just to kind of like build up your network, build up these referral sources. And so this book is called What They Don't Teach You in Law School, How to Get a Job, the 6-Step Process for Landing a Great Legal Job, even if you don't know where to start. And as we're in our last few minutes of our conversation here, Adam, is there a missing hidden question? Is there something that you wish that I would ask you that I just don't know to ask?
I don't know if there's a hidden question. I guess the one piece that I would say is, going on your last point about about sort of the reticence to engage with people in this way, is law students are spoiled in a way because they've been successful academically and maybe otherwise by the time they got to law school. So they never really had to kind of reach outside themselves. Now, there's some exceptions. Of course, there are people that have worked before law school, but generally the case, if you go straight from undergrad, you've never really had to kind of focus on the employer, focus on the other. You really were lauded and celebrated for your accomplishment. So I guess the pivot here and the question, maybe the answer instead of the question would be, the employer's only going to care about your accomplishments, right? You have a lot of accomplishment, but the only accomplishment they care about is the one that's going to lead them to their goals and overcome their challenges. And so I think that's kind of the appropriate mindset. Is I think a law student, before they read the book or before they start thinking about these kinds of things, is thinking, man, I have a whole bunch of accomplishments. I have a whole bunch to bring to the table. And in fact, what the employer just cares about is they don't care about any of that. They care about the one thing they do care about is which one of your accomplishments, if any, can help our clients attain their goals quickly, right? Which one of your accomplishments can do that? What about your experience can do that? And if you could connect your experience, right, and your accomplishments, and it's not rocket science, because you'll be doing the network and everything, you'll find out the answers to those questions. But that's the key. It's not how great you've been and you've accomplished so much. It's you've accomplished things, and in particular, you accomplished this one thing or have this particular experience that connects with what the employer is looking for.
That's huge. Like you have all these things, but there's one thing that they're looking for, or they in your resume they see that you've done this one thing. They're like, okay, there's the potential I'm looking for. There's what I want. And it seems like just emotional intelligence is more important than ever these days, and that you can have all these smarts, but if you let the arrogance take over, then you might be squandering your potential. And instead, it helps to have the gratitude and have the empathy and perhaps push out ourselves outside our comfort zone and embrace the networking and the personality and being genuinely interested in other people, and especially how you can help other people and just being a decent human being. And so this is definitely what we need to hear about, especially those struggling law school students, or maybe those that are stuck at the starting gate, overthinking, worried about making the wrong choices. And it seems like there's just this kind of idea of, you know it when you see it, right? You worry about what you should specialize in the law, or what your major should be. You try a few things, especially when you're young, especially when there's time to make the mistake, and you say, oh my gosh, I love this aspect of the law. It's so much fun. And this is the path that I'm on, but you don't know unless you try, right? And
Right.
we've all been in those situations where we got feedback from someone and we were surprised by what excited them, and what interested them was not what interested us. And the only way to know for sure is to have these conversations, is to embrace the cringe, pursue the awkwardness, and get to the other side. But the good news is you don't have to go this alone, right? You have Adam Gropper on your team, and you have this book, What They Don't Teach You in Law School. And so any final words before sending people to the book and to legaljob.com?
Yeah, I guess I would just a quote comes to mind, which is, it's very simple, and actually someone taught me this quote, and it's probably been one of the most the quote that's helped my whole career, including getting the job. It's just 3 words, Robert. It's uh, It's about them. I was trying to think of it's not about me, but it's about them makes it even smaller. It's about them. Those are the three words. And if you can remember those three words, if a law student can remember those three words, it's going to help you in the finding the sort of the practice area you like. It's going to help you with networking and meeting a bunch of people. It's going to help you think like an employer. It's going to help you become an expert on the employer. It's going to help you with all these steps. And you know what, Robert? It's also going to help you be a good lawyer. A good lawyer is a service person, is servicing their client or their clients. And if you have that mentality, it's about them, then you're ahead of the game, right? Because it's never really about you. I mean, the only time it's sort of about you is when you're thinking about your likes and everything and thinking about what practice area you want. You do some introspection. But to as support for all that, if you have that it's about them mentality, I think it'll serve law students well, throughout their career, including getting the job, getting that first dream job.
I agree completely. It helps with your getting your legal job. It helps with the job in general, and it helps with just your social interactions. People love for people to be curious about them, and it's rare, especially these days when just people are so self-involved and nervous. So make it about them. I love that advice. And the next steps here are to check out the book, What They Don't Teach You in Law School by Adam Gropper, and also LegalJob.com, where that website has many amazing resources and articles to accelerate your legal career, sound advice, and tested proven strategies for law students eager to land their dream legal job and associates determined to make partner. Mr. Adam Gropper, LegalJob.com, and What They Don't Teach You in Law School. Wonderful speaking with you.
You too. And check out the audiobook that Robert Plank graciously did an amazing job, a really great job on the audiobook. And for you law students that are busy and don't have time, that's your answer. And I think you'll